Good morning, everybody. I got us right just about top of the hour. We're going to go get started, and brothers join us. They can join us as we go. Um, a couple quick things before we get rolling into the next 25, 30 minutes we'll have together. Um, just as a point of administration, as we go through this, if you have questions or want to interject something, by all means, you can feel free to do that. You can come off mute and throw out a question if you'd like. The other thing you can do, if you prefer, is you can use the chat function here inside of Zoom and jot a question down if you've got one. And we get to the end, we can kind of tick through them and tackle through that stuff too. So feel free to do that. Again, just getting started here, I always kind of like to start our time talking with coaches by kind of laying the groundwork a little bit of who we are, where we're coming from, what we're doing here, and why this session is even happening. My name's Tom Woods. Again, I'm with a company called R2 Sports Technology. We're located out here in Colorado, just a little bit south of Denver, is where I am at the moment. But I always like to start by, anytime we get a chance to talk to football coaches, I always want to make sure I give you a good idea of where we're coming from. And let me just say this, first of all, I am not a football coach. I have never been a football coach. I don't think I'll ever be, I don't expect to ever be a football coach. I don't have aspirations to be a football coach. Got a lot of respect for football coaches, but I am not a coach. I am a career data guy, for lack of a better word. I started a company about 20, 25 years ago. It does a lot of data work in the aerospace and defense industry, doing a lot of work with places like Lockheed Martin, NASA, Boeing, defense companies like that. Still very actively involved in that sector of work. We also do a lot of data work in the financial world all the time. I won't get into too much detail on that, but we're heavily involved in finance, aerospace, and defense. And we work with football coaches, as odd as that may seem. Several years ago, we ran into some football coaches and saw what they were doing with film data and started doing some things for them. So I guess I say all that to say this: as we walk through this stuff, everything I'm going to share with you today is going to come from a data person's perspective, not a football coach's perspective. I think we've known a lot of coaches, so we have a pretty good sense of how the world works out there. But I will always defer to a coach if there's ever a question, because I know you have you're not data people per se. I mean, you may have an appreciation for data and a capability for data, but your job is to help get a bunch of young guys to come together and win a football game. And that's different from data. What we hope to do is do things with data to help you as a coach get that done a little bit easier. That's all. But we're not quite one of these analytical weenies of the world, although I get lumped in with them. So that's the first thing. And there'll be certain things that we'll touch on here in the next few minutes where I'll kind of caveat it and say, hey, this is spoken as a data guy, but I would defer to you guys as coaches because I haven't walked a mile in your shoes, so to speak. Now, the other big thing, and the other elephant in the room I'll address before we dive into the material here is this. I'm the founder. I'm with R2 Sports Technology. That is a for-profit business that we work with teams and they pay us money and we do things for them. Okay. But this is not a veiled sales pitch. I'm not going to get to the end of this thing and say, hey, for $19.95, you can do this. Because, well, first, it's not $19.95, but secondly, I don't want to do that to you to begin with. So that's not what this is. If what we want to give you here the next 25 minutes is some material that we think if you kind of digest what we're talking about here and you incorporate that into how you do your film data work, it'll make you better. If we never cross paths again, we never cross paths again. But I think the next 25 minutes can make you better. The roots of this session, I'm going to go ahead and here's what we'll do. We're going to walk through a set of notes. We're going to look at some data. I'm going to show you a few things. That's kind of how this is going to go. When we're done, we'll send you a copy of these notes so you have them. This session is being recorded. You can come back and view it again if you want to go back over any of this stuff. So with that said, let me share my screen and we'll start diving right into it here. Give me just 1 second to bring it up. I'm not going to PowerPoint you to death. It's one page and we'll work through it together. The title of our session together today is called Breaking Down Film with a Purpose. And the roots of this have always come, like I said, we've been working with football teams since about 2014, 13, so about the last 10 years. So we've always said, man, and again, as I mentioned, I'm a data guy, not a football coach. So we've always said, hey, man, what would I want to tell football coaches, if they, and this has happened a good amount, if they come to me as a data person and say, hey, what would you recommend I do when I'm breaking down film? This is kind of the culmination of that. I'm like, if I had 20 minutes with a bunch of football coaches, here's what I'd tell them that I think would make them better. That's the whole point. Now, as we get started on this, and guys, here's what I'm gonna do real quick. I'm getting a little bit of background noise from folks out there. So I don't want to, if you don't mind muting, that'd be awesome. Unless you have a question, then by all means unmute. That'd be great. A lot of us, we end up on autopilot so much. This is not just true of football coaches. This is all of us, me, everybody. I talk to so many guys that they break down film because coaches break down film. And I'm a football coach, and so we break down film. But sometimes there's not much more thought that goes into it than that. We're on autopilot. We do what we do because this is what we always do, and this is how we do it. And this film data process just looks like this for us. It hasn't changed in 10 years, and it probably won't change if we don't do something different to begin with. I want to challenge you guys to stop for a second and just take a few minutes to think through why you're doing it. And because what we're going to look at here is this, in our work with football coaches, we've seen kind of from our perspective, three very distinct purposes that your film data should accomplish for you. And if you understand those purposes, then the way you break down film changes a bit, because you have to, if you do certain things a little bit different way, it'll support these three big purposes happening. That's the whole point of our time together today. So let me share with you the three things that we think your film data should do for you. And I want to challenge you guys to kind of question yourself to see if you're getting all this out of your film data or not. The first one is this: your film data should have a diagnostic purpose. It should, the way you look at film, break down film, should allow you to pretty easily see where a team is healthy or sick, where things are broken or working. You should, and this obviously has a lot of self-scout applications, but it works on opponent scout stuff too. Too many times we know teams, coaches who they're blind too often. They go out and they try and perform on a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and it's not working, but they're not sure why. And so they either persist in an error all season long, or they just have to stop doing something that's fundamental to who they are because they can't figure it out. The way you break down your film, you should be able to very quickly diagnose from it. Okay. I should be able to look at it and say, oh, right there's the problem. Here's how I fix it. It's one big purpose. Okay. So you don't want to waste your whole half of your season. You know, it's like if your arm is hurting. Well, this is me. My arm, I hurt my shoulder, and I went like 6 months not being able to use my right arm, right? Because it's like, okay, I can't, I want to operate that way. I need to know what's wrong and get it fixed. Second purpose is a predictive purpose. And this is the one that if I polled most coaches, if I had 100 coaches sitting in front of me and I asked them, hey, why are you breaking down film? 90% of them, the answer would be a predictive response, right? And it makes total sense. And it's a really good purpose to be doing is the ability to predict and anticipate what my opponent's going to do, looking for tendencies, trying to say, hey, when he shows this look, here's what happens. He's going to go this way or that way. All that kind of stuff is really, really crucial, important, critical. But I think it's the one that dominates for most coaches. Most coaches are just thinking predictively. Okay. And we're going to talk about in a second here some big things you got to do with your data that can A, help you predict a ton better, but B, also kind of help you understand that prediction's not the entire name of the game. Okay. So a diagnostic purpose, I got to look at myself and say, oh, there's what's broken. Predictive purpose, I want to have a high degree of confidence in really knowing what a guy's going to do or not do against me that I can rely on. And the third one, this purpose is the one that I think we've seen is probably the biggest missed opportunity for coaches. And we're going to hopefully fill in this gap for you here a little bit, like I said again. But that's this: your film data should allow you to clearly implement a plan that shows you what the best possible play calling situations are against an opponent in all these different scenarios. Now, okay, that's a little bit too wordy. The bottom line is it should tell you what a good or bad play call is. It should tell you ahead of time. Like if I got a game on a Saturday, I'm a college program, I'm playing on a Saturday, I should know on a Monday. My data has the ability to tell me on a Monday what a good or a bad call on a Saturday looks like. Okay. Now, but what happens too often to do that, you have to set your data up in a certain way. And that's what we're going to get into next is how you do that. But I think that's the one we see that is the biggest missed opportunity for coaches all the time. Again, what we dominantly see, and we work with teams at all levels. So let's see. But I will say this level kind of doesn't matter to a certain extent. I'll see some high school coaches who what they're doing with their film data is so impressive to me. It's better than, D1 FCS schools that we work with, right? And I'll see some guys who do absolutely nothing. And then there's the Ohio States of the world who have every resource in the world, and they have different, they have like Pro Football Focus and all these other data sources, and they have perfect data out the wazoo. It's all over the place, okay? But the thing that we consistently see is coaches tend to gravitate just towards the second one, almost entirely. The things if a team is doing their own breakdown, what we typically see is that they're breaking it down just to predict, and they're not setting things up to diagnose and implement plans well. So let's talk data-wise. Now, what we're going to talk about is nitty-gritty stuff here. What do you do? How do you break down film? How should you do what you're currently doing a little bit differently to support these three purposes happening well? Okay. The first one is this. You need to adopt in your program a universal program-wide data language. Now, this is a principle of data. All these are principles of data, but this one kind of specifically is one that I would say the same. I'd had the same conversation with. I was in a meeting yesterday with some people at Lockheed Martin working on this NASA program, and we had a conversation related to this. Okay, it's not that it's a football specific thing. This is a global data thing, and that is data is the most literal, non-emotional thing there is. It is so specific. What we have to be able to do some of these purposes up above, we want to be able to do. We have to be able to connect threads through data. We have to be able to see things in a certain way. We have to be able to connect pieces of data together. If you're ever going to do that, the only way you can do it is if there's consistency in your language. It doesn't matter what your language is. What matters is it's consistently applied. And we're going to look at examples of this here in a minute. I'll bring you into some film data and show you what we're talking about. But this is where, what we'll see a lot of times, you may be one of those teams that has like, you have, 3 or 4 different guys contribute to your breakdown, right? One guy's breaking this down, one guy's doing this, one guy's doing this, and you're trying to bring it all together. The thing you have to be real careful of, it has to, typos, all that kind of stuff will mess you up, but your verbiage has to be clearly established. If one guy looks at a formation and he likes to call it trips open, and another guy looks at it and says, yeah, it's the same thing, but I call it trips O, right? Those don't match. They aren't the same, even though everybody knows they're the same, but in your data, in the world of data, they're not, and they don't connect. You have to, again, so it doesn't matter what it is, but establish it. You control it as the coach. That needs to be present. The language you use when you do self-scout has to be the same as you use when you do opponent scout or in your off-season program. Consistent language. That's key. And we'll look at why that matters here in a second. Second big one. This is really, this is a really, really important one. A lot of you guys may already be doing this, which is great, but some we see kind of miss the boat on this. And that's this. When you break down your data, break it down in layers. There's a misconception out there, I think a lot of times, that people think that complexity infers intelligence. That if I take more time, I'm, well, first of all, I'm a big advocate of outworking people, so don't get me wrong. But people tend to think if I spend more time breaking down film and being more specific and going down to nitty-gritty detail in my breakdown, that I'm somehow getting an edge or I'm smarter or better than the guy over there who's not doing that. Now, you may be more committed, but the data may not be helping you. What happens is so often is that some guys go to 2 extremes. Some guys don't break down enough, and some guys break down too much. And the problem with it is, and this really gets to our ability to predict things well, is you have to try and find patterns in data. And to find patterns in data, sample size matters a lot. And specificity and complexity can be the enemy of sample size. Because what you end up doing if you go down too deep and you're looking at all these very specific play names, that's triple XY banana, that's triple XY banana left, you get real specific. What happens is none of them show up often enough to find a pattern. And so you end up, there's a sweet spot in the middle that lets you predict things really well. And too often guys miss it. They either stay above it or they blow past it. So when you break things down, you see these sub bullets here. We always encourage coaches. You want to develop your plans conceptually, and you want to implement a plan specifically. What that means is, if I'm a high school team now. I got a game on a Friday night, and it's a Sunday or Monday. As I'm start forming up a plan of how to attack a guy and how to handle a certain team, I want to understand the right things to do at the concept level. So I want to know. I want to be able to look at a team and say, okay, being in cover two is the right coverage concept to be in this unique situation. I want my data to tell me that, because then I can take that. I can now go to all my specific cover two alternative play names, and I can implement specific ones I like, but I want to be right at the concept level. So when you break things down, think conceptually. If you're very specific with things, you want to create a bucket level above that, where you can take things and aggregate all these specific coverage names. Well, they all have an association to cover two. Or if it's a bunch of specific play names, you can bucket them and say, okay, all these specific play names, the concept they are is outside zone running plays. So create these categories. And what that does, you get two big advantages from doing that. Number one, you increase your sample size in your data without breaking down more data. So some people think, oh, if I'm going to get enough sample size to find a pattern, I got to break down 3, 4, 5 more games. I don't have the time, or I don't have the data to see it. You don't really have to do that. You can get real good predictive stuff in even 2 or 3 game breakdowns easily if you bucket things, because you're going to see that, oh, okay, I may only have 2 or 3 specific play names, but I've got 15 outside zones, and I can find a pattern at that level. The other big benefit you get is you can move faster. It's easier to break down film when you're doing it conceptually as opposed to specifically. It's easier to look at, an opposing defense and not worry so much about, is that a cloud 2 sky coverage? It's easier to just look at and say that was cover 2, 2, 2, 0, 0, 3, 2, 2. It's easier to move that way. And it gives you more predictive benefit, and it lets you just get the concept right. Okay. Huge one. Don't miss the middle spot. That's where the key is. Find these intermediate level buckets and just catch concepts. Do your world of good. Third one. This is the one. This is. I mean, these all matter a lot to me. Don't get me wrong. But if there's a mantra that I tell guys about breaking down film, it's this. And this is again the thing that I think is the biggest miss that we see with the football coaches we work with is this. The principle is, if you control it, you need to include it in your breakdown. And so often that is not the case. But the power of that is huge, because what happens is, again, but our tendency as a coach is to be thinking predictively. I want to know what he's going to do to me. Okay. Which is a very powerful thing, again. But if you think about a game where you got 60, 65 offensive plays happening, there's only a few occasions in a game. Now, they can be very pivotal and they can change a game, but it's not every play that you can just nail. I knew exactly what he was going to do. I mean, you can get a sense, but it's occasionally you can pick up on ooh, we nailed that one, had it right. That's good, but it's spotty in terms of how effective that is over the course of a game. What's better is if I knew in my data, I don't know what he's going to do, but I know what he doesn't like. That, if I know that, then even though I don't know what he's going to do, I have the ability to serve up the things he doesn't like. If I could do that I can do a whole lot more often. So I may not be able to predict what he's going to do to me, but I can definitely put him in a spot he doesn't like. That's better. But to do that, I have to know what he does and doesn't like that I control. So this is where this comes in. You see these examples down here. Let's say I'm a defensive coordinator, okay? And I'm breaking down an opposing offense. And so my inclination is to be very predictive, which if you got the time and ability, by all means do it. Put in what's that offense doing. But I would think conceptually, again, don't get too specific, but I would be looking at this opposing offense and say, okay, give me a general concept. What was their look? What was their kind of general formation family? What kind of play concept did they run? What direction did they go? I care about that stuff. But the problem I have with that is I don't have any control over that. You're going to get into a game and you do not control what personnel group he shows you. You don't control what call he's going to make. You don't control any of that. What do you control as a defensive coordinator? You control the look you're going to show them. You control the front you're going to be in. You're going to control whether you're bringing pressure or not. You control what coverage you're going to be in. Those are the things you control. So if I control that, when I'm breaking down this opposing offense, what I really want to do is I want to know what was that defense doing against that offense. And to do that, that's not my defense I'm looking at. I'm looking at somebody else's defense. That's why number 2 is so important. I got to think conceptually. I don't have to worry specifics, just conceptually, what was that defense doing against them? Now, if I do that, then what my data tells me, I can dial up any situation. I can look at my data and I can say, wow, okay, in this situation, he cannot handle an odd front. They can't run against him. Well, if I see that, even though I don't know what specific he's going to do, I know he doesn't like that. I serve that up and I shove that in his face all day long. And I can do that on almost every play. I can know what makes him uncomfortable. But what we see too often is the only thing sitting in the data was predictive. It wasn't what they controlled. Same thing on the offensive side of the ball. I'm an offensive coordinator looking at opposing defense. Yes, I care. I would love to be able to predict with confidence what coverage they're going to be in or if they're sending pressure. I want all that. I do. But what I also want to know is, hey, what were these offenses doing against that defense that were successful? Because if I can do that, then I can make sure I feed him things that he can't handle. And when I do that, my performance goes up. My yards per play go up. My points per game go up. Everything gets better when I'm operating that way. Okay. Now let me dive out. Let me bring up a spreadsheet here. I'm going to show you examples of these 3 principles and we'll kind of close down to 10 minutes. I talk too much, so forgive me. I'll wrap by showing you a couple kind of conceptual things that we do that might be of interest to you. So this is raw film data. This is just data example kind of stuff we get. It could come from Huddle. It could come from DV Sport. It could come from Quick Cut. It could come from Catapult, Exos, any number of sources. It's just raw film data from teams that they've sent us over the years that we use as an example. In this case, I'm going to click to this tab right here. This is an example of the principle I told you before where you need a global language that you apply all the time. So this was an offensive guy. And in this case, this was his offensive self-scout data. A lot of things in here you'd expect to see, play IDs, down distance, yard line gain, all that kind of stuff. But I just highlighted a couple examples in here to illustrate the point. Here he is in his self-scout data, and he's broken down this backfield that he's got broken down here. And he's got these terms in here that don't mean anything I don't know what they mean. They mean something to him. But in his language, they define backfield AG, BG, H, he's using this terminology, okay? He's got play family over here, and he's using terms like OZ, IZ, screen. That's his verbiage that he looks at when he does his own self-scout. Now, same guy looking at his opponent scout data. So now he's breaking down film on an opponent, okay? But he also is, when he's doing that, he's breaking down backfield and family in that one too. And you can see right here, he's using the same language, BG, AG. IZ, OZ, screen. What's so crucial about that is that now we can bring those 2 things together and he can start to see a whole bunch of stuff that fulfill those purposes we're talking about. If he was doing his opponent's, if in his self-scout he said BG, AG, because that's the terminology he uses. But if he looked at his opponent's scout and he was saying 2 back, 1 back, 2 back, 1 back, those wouldn't match. We wouldn't be able to bring the 2 together. Same language, everywhere. Self-scout, opponent scout, off, you name it, use it, universally adopted everywhere. That's the big issue there. Let's talk about the issue of layers in data. I had its filter set from before. Let me give you a quick example where this comes up. This rears its head in so many places, but this is kind of a quick example. This is I think a defensive coordinator breaking down an opposing offense, okay? Now they have formations in here, and this guy has broken things down with tons of detail. Like, look at his formation names in here. Here's trips Y off. Here's trips Y flex T strongest, trips Y flex T weakest, trips Y flex. This probably took him forever to break down. He's got hundreds of plays in here where he's gotten really specific with his breakdown. Okay. Now, the problem with that is it's great. And you tend to say, man, I was exhausting. It took me forever, but dang, look at that detail we got. That's awesome. The problem is if I want to pick up a tendency on one of these, say ace Y off, if I select it, there's hundreds of plays, but it only shows up, in this case, 8 times, which is actually a lot for this one, to be honest with you. We'll give you another one, like ace squeeze. Ace squeeze, he's got in there 1 time. So you took the time to get detailed, but it's only in there once. And a lot of these are in there 2 or 3 times. You can't pick up a pattern on that. This is not enough sample size there. So we encourage them to do, and what they went on and did, excuse me, guys, was incorporate another level above that. If you still want to do that, great, but put another category above it. And they did, called formation family. And in that, they kept it real simple. Just said, we're just going to label it 3x1, 2x2, 1x3, something very simple to identify, right? Quick and easy to move through, and we can add this other bucket. So now when I do that, that ace Y off thing, which was a 2x2, only showed up like 1 or 2 times. If I look at how many 2x2s I have, suddenly I've got 180 of them. So I have tons. At the next level up, I have lots of, it's still meaningful, probably even more meaningful, because from a predictive standpoint in a game, it's easier for me to pick up that it's 2x2 than it's specifically ace Y off. So by moving up a level, I didn't have to break down even more film, but I moved up a level, but my sample size went whoosh, and now I can find tendencies and patterns at that level that I couldn't see before. Okay, big one. Then to the issue of if you include it, if you control it, include it. Quick example here. This is a high school team out in Alabama. Opponent scout, looking at opposing offense, everything you expect to see. Down, distance, hash, personnel, backfield play direction, all that kind of stuff. We came back to him and said, hey, it's great predictively, but it's not telling you anything that you can use. And so this is an example of a guy, he started to put his stuff in here. He added 3 fields. He put front, blitz, and he's added coverage. He's got to start adding his stuff in here. But you can see, just even at a very conceptual level, even or odd front, blitz, yes or no. It could be direction, just right, left, middle. It's something simple and easy to identify. But what he now has, he has the ability to now look and say, okay, in a certain situation, the things I control, here are the things that I control that he doesn't like. And if I know that, then I'm going to serve it up to him all day. It tells me how to make him uncomfortable. And I'm going to do everything I can to make him uncomfortable on every play to the maximum extent possible. Even if I don't know what he's going to do, I know in these situations, this makes him uncomfortable. I'm going to just make him uncomfortable all day. And I'm going to perform much better. Same thing, offensive side of the ball. This is a breakdown on an opposing defense, what you'd expect to see: boxes, fronts, blitzes, coverages. But he's included things like a run and pass family, a general classification of things they were doing, outside zone, inside zone, these concepts. And that allows him to come in here and say, okay, I don't know what I might see from him, but I know that in this situation, he can't handle outside zone. So I'm going to serve it up to him if I can. All right. We're down to our last couple of minutes. Let me show you the last couple of things here, guys, and then we'll start to wrap. And if you got to roll, you can absolutely roll. We wrap up with this. I kind of come back to the diagnostics topic for a second, but really it's about this. If you do these kind of things, again, we never cross paths again. I hope these 3 principles can help you be better with what you're doing with your data, and that you think about trying to make sure you achieve these purposes up here. But if you do all this stuff right down through here, it's great. You're going to have good data that's conditioned well to do this stuff. The challenge still remains, though, for you to a certain extent, is you have to then go interpret it and make sense of it, right? But at least you'll have it. You'll be able to do it. I just want to show you real quick. There's a concept that we use a lot. It's called a dash. We call them dashboards, but really it's the concept of visualizing data. And there are tools out there that will allow you to do things like this. And I'll show you real quick. It's the old principle that a picture's worth 1,000 words. We create a lot of these things that are called dashboards. And I'll just introduce the concept to you for a minute. What this does, this allows all those purposes to kind of happen in a very quick, intuitive way. All a dashboard does is it reaches down into raw data that you'd have set up right, and it creates a visual representation of it, makes a picture of it. This is something we do for a lot of the guys we work with. This is a high school team's self-scout, I believe, that we're looking at. You saw these dots here on the football field. That's every play they ran in this last season. A blue's a pass, a gray dot's a run. You see all these other sections in here, these, like, we call them data grids. We got these colored boxes in here. The way you interpret with these and where these get real powerful, it's just about size and color. So take as an example, offensive formation here. The bigger the box is, that's what happened more often. So I can tell a team's preference for what they like to do just by the size of a box. So this team likes to be from double tight a lot, but they don't like to be in ace very much, because ace is a small box and double tight's a big box. So I can just visually see it. Color tells you how good an offense is performing. So if an offense is very efficient and doing really, really well, it's going to be blue. If they're performing very poorly and not having much success, it's red. And it's like this temperature scale in between there, where like yellow's better than red, green's better than yellow, blue's better than green. So with those 2 dimensions alone, a tool like this lets me now accomplish all those purposes we just talked about very easily. because I can tell what a team doesn't like to do, where they're broken, where they're fixed. So take this from a diagnostic standpoint real quick. We talked about the importance of doing diagnostics. If this is my offense, I'm an offensive coordinator looking at my own offensive performance here, and color tells me where I'm good or bad, I could do a diagnostic and say, look at this. Well, let's go right here. Look at this play in here called Giant. So here's a lot of plays they run. Look at their Viking play. I could look at that and I could diagnose and say, man, Viking's good. Why? I don't even know what Viking is. I haven't seen this team play, but it's a blue box, which means its performance is good. It's 8 yards of play and 61% success. That's great. But if I'm looking for diagnostic issues and where am I struggling offensively, here's this Giant play that I run a fair amount of the time, but it's orange, which tells me its performance is off. And I could go and I could click on that. A tool like this lets me dive down into that. Here's the value of diagnostics. And if I click on that Giant play, I can now start to see all these different. When I do that, I isolate the Giant play. I'm looking at only the Giant play. And I can look at size and color, and I can start to tell, boy, we are terrible running this from 12 personnel. We can't run it from 12. We can run it on first down, but that's about the best down we can run it on. We're a lot better when we run it from the left hash than the right hash. All these things start to just blow up for you. And again, I don't want to be too lost in the tool itself, but the point is, if you break your data down right, and you're looking for these purposes, your data wants to scream a story at you quickly and fast. Tools like this let it scream it to you a little bit faster. Okay. Now, here's what we're at the bottom of the hour. I appreciate you guys taking time. I really do. Like I said, we will send you the notes on this. There's a recording of it. We can get you to, if you want to go back and take a look at it. But I do want to let you know, if you have some film data you want to send to us, by all means, feel free. We can look at it and we can, kick you something back to say, I would probably recommend inserting a level here or something like that. We're happy to do that. If this concept of this dashboard is somewhat intriguing to you, guys do this all the time. You can dump your data, send it to us. We'll throw it into one of these dashboards, send it back to you. You can go play around with these things and see what you can learn about your own team in the off season. Feel free to do that too. So we'll give you the details on that when we ping you back. But I do appreciate you guys taking time. Again, thank you so much.